Thanks for checking out my video. If you want to learn more from me, I have a lot of classes on Udemy. You can find the links to a lot of those in the description. Alright, so as long as my recording is working, today we're going to be talking about the worship of goddesses in history, well, primarily in this discussion about the male worship of the goddesses. Because now the feminine and women back in the day were more of the figureheads and those in charge when it came to goddess worship. In Mesopotamia, you had the high priestess, who was the head of the temple, and during the bigger festivals, her role as the divine feminine would be the counterpart with the king or the ruler of whatever particular city it was, to represent the union of the masculine and the feminine and the cycles of nature and bounty for the land and bounty for their and bene- beneficence for their culture and their city. So the divine feminine was represented by the priestesses. Now, men did have roles in that, and for any women watching, this is, compliments to you guys because you have the divine feminine within you. And for men that are watching, it is possible for us to connect with the divine feminine. And let me get into my notes here, and I'm probably gonna add some things, but a little backstory for a second. The first ritual that I ever did, which I've recreated it at least twice now, was a dedication to the goddess back when I practiced strict Wicca out of a couple of books and things like that, right when I was stepping into it. And, now it's like 20 years later, and the goddess has been knocking on my door for forever. And it hasn't been until the last couple of years when I've really started to understand that, even working with the Simon Necronomicon, you know, this is centered around the goddess Inanna. And based on her stories and different things like that, and whatever kind of stuff, which I'm trying to demystify on this channel, by the way, she wasn't just a lower level goddess. Back in the day, the main deities in I think it was Uruk, Inanna was at the top, and then you had Anu, the sky god, and you had Inanna. So you had the divine masculine and feminine. Now they weren't exactly partners. Anu, or An, the sky god, was more of like her grandfather. But then you have Inanna being placed at the top, which really goes to show she was the first written record um existence of the divine feminine, and I'm talking the big cheese divine feminine. So, men's worship of the goddess in history. I got some notes over here on the right side, so if you see my eyes doing funny stuff, that's why. So, in Mesopotamia, which is Sumer, Akkad, and Babylon, men served as priests of Inanna, which is the great goddess of love, war, and sovereignty. You read her stories, she's a total badass. Once she picked a fight with a mountain, by the way. Ritual roles for men included singing hymns, tending the temples, cleaning them, doing different things, and participating in sacred drama, recreations of the myths. The Gala priests, which were the male priests of Inanna, were often gender non-conforming, embodying the fluidity of the goddess's power. They actually had outfits where half of it was masculine dress and half of it was feminine dress. And this denotes the fact that we have that masculine and feminine polarity within us. And if you're a guy and you lean too far on the masculine, that's bad. If you're a woman and you lean too far on the feminine side, that's bad. We can go, deeper into that kind of stuff on another video about polarity. But yeah. Next line. Frog in my throat. Kings performed hieros gamos, or the sacred marriage rites, with the priestesses, like I talked about before, symbolizing union with the goddess to legitimize their reign. So the goddess would come down and be embodied by the priestess, and the hieros gamos rite would solidify the king's right to be there. Back when I was in high school, the royalty got got the idea that they could rule from the mandate of heaven, or where divinity says, I have a right to be in on this throne. This is kind of where it came from, but they eliminated the divine feminine from it, because what do you have? You have the king at the top, right? That power that the king has comes from the divine feminine, right? Because the Mother Earth, right? Who tells the people who can be in charge of the land itself, the goddess, right? So in Egypt, male priests served goddesses like Isis, Hathor, and Sekhmet. They performed daily rituals like purification, chanting, offering food, incense, and music. Men and women both took vows of celibacy and ritual purity in temple service. Pharaohs were considered to be the sons of Isis. And Isis, or Aset, Isis is the Greekanized term. Her name is Aset, which literally means throne. So who gives the right to sit on the throne? The goddess does. See how important she is? In the classical world we're moving to, in Greece, men were devotees of Artemis, Athena, Demeter, and Aphrodite. The Eleusinian mysteries, initiations into Demeter and Persephone's rites, which is, the death and rebirth and going into the underworld and coming back in a cyclical manner, which, by the way, was plagiarized from Mesopotamia with Inanna and Dumuzi doing the same thing. Well, not Dumuzi and Geshtinanna, his sister, doing the same thing after Inanna descended and then came back up. Where was I? Went off on a little tangent here. Where am I? Yep. The Eleusinian mysteries, initiations into Demeter and Persephone's rites, welcome both men and women. Male initiates sought rebirth and the promise of an afterlife. You're born through a woman, how do you think you get reborn? Also, through the feminine. The priests of Dionysus often embodied ecstatic and feminine aspects of divinity, blurring gender roles in service to the god and the goddesses entwined with him. In Rome, the cult of Sybil, Magna Mater, or the Great Mother, was central. Sybil's male priest, the Gali. Interesting that name kind of sounds like the other one from Mesopotamia, doesn't it? Performed ecstatic rituals, drumming, dancing, and even ritual castration to embody devotion. Sounds painful. So Roman men also joined the cult of Isis, or Aset, participating in processions, wearing white robes, and practicing purification rites. Over in India, male devotees, the Bhaktas, of goddesses like Durga, Kali, and Lakshmi, played vital roles in the worship and festivals. Tantric traditions taught men to honor Shakti, the divine feminine creative force, as the source of life and power. So see all this leaning, showing, and venerating the goddess rather than the male god? We need to get back to that stuff. That's what we're doing here on this channel. And then yogis sought union with the goddess within. Remember, yoga means to yoke, to bring oneself in union with the divine. Divine feminine? Awakening Kundalini as the divine feminine energy coiled at the base of the spine. Technically speaking, if you delineate that kind of stuff, there's like that snake down here. Now, the lower realms and the unconscious and the earth, because it's below our feet, is denoted as being feminine, right? And raising the Kundalini to the top, we're taking Mother Earth and meeting it with Father Sky. And you're bringing the embodiment, the physical body, the unconscious and stuff, and you're bringing it into awareness, into that higher consciousness. So feminine down here meets masculine up here. That's another way of talking about Hieros Gamos, too. Where was I? Oh, moving on to Celtic and European traditions. Druids honored goddesses like Brigid, the Morgana, and Danu. Male poets and bards often invoked the muse as for inspiration and stuff, and muses were feminine spirits. Kingship was tied to goddess worship. Echoes of Mesopotamia, doesn't it? Celtic kings symbolically married the land goddess, or the sovereignty goddess, to legitimize their rule. Kind of sounds like back in Mesopotamia with the Hieros Gamos rite, where that's how the kings got the divine mandate. It's been around for a while, hadn't it? Let's see. Then Christian and medieval echoes we're moving into. Though suppressed, Marian devotion, worship of the Virgin Mary, offered men a way to connect with the divine feminine. Because if you dive into Catholicism, That's the most pagan-ish of Christian religions, because you have the saints and you have devotion to Mary, and that kind of gives a polytheistic slant to the worship of God and Jesus. And you can even, I might even make a video on the evidence of this kind of stuff. But the Holy Spirit, the Shekinah, that's God's feminine counterpart, also known as wisdom or Sophia. That was kind of, stamped out in the Bible. So you have the wisdom, Sophia, Asherah, all the evidence is in there. So there's that divine feminine counterpart. But because of masculine desire to rule and oppress and control and patriarchy and all that stuff, we have the problems of making it male-centered. But if you look at the evidence, it doesn't hold water. Where was I? Yeah, because I can't scroll down anymore. Knights of the Grail and troubadours in medieval Europe practiced courtly love, a mystical devotion to the lady that mirrored worship of the goddess. So Knights of the Grail, their center of worship arguably is Mary, Marian devotion. By the way, little segue, Mary actually means priestess if you go back far enough. So that's why you have Mother Mary, Mary Magdalene, and Mary Salome, right? Got a lot of Marys there. Why? Because it wasn't a name, dude. It was a title. Gonna dive way deeper into that, probably, if I can remember to write notes on that, and then delineate, and then come back here to make another video. Where was I? All right. Alchemists often describe the conjunctio, or sacred union, there's Heros Gamos again, of king and queen as a mystical marriage within the soul, uniting the anima, the animus, the masculine and the feminine, uniting that polarity within all of us. You go into alchemy, we're talking about the conscious and unconscious, the shadow and the light merging together to create more of a whole person. Then roles and practices of men in goddess worship. Priests and spiritual specialists. The men led ceremonies, they tended temples, offered songs, incense, food, and flowers. Ascetics and mystics, they entered trance, danced, and did altered states to embody or receive the goddess. Sacred kings, ritually uniting with priestesses and Heros Gamos to bring fertility to the land and people. Initiates and devotees, undergoing rites of passage like the Eleusinian mysteries for rebirth and divine blessing. Poets and lovers, channeling devotion through art, love, and song, like the muses, often exalting women as embodiments of the divine. And if you're a dude and you have a lady in your life, that's how you gotta look at her. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Then Tantrikas and yogis, awakening Shakti or the goddess power within themselves for liberation and union. Nowadays, because of the masculine result-driven society and masculine-centered spirituality, like Christianity, being mainstream, we are forgetting about the goddess. Men are pushed to be manly, which is correct in embodying their own archetype, but we are forgetting that we have both masculine and feminine energies within us that need to be balanced. And just like having influence of a mother and father, we need to have association with the god and goddess. In the Kara tradition, for example, when you go through the different karpais, one of the things that you do is you are ritualistically, symbolically reborn, and then you connect with the Texeapus with the mother and father archetypes. So then you literally refer to the Father Sky and Mother Earth as your parents, as your spiritual parents. So you have your physical body parents, your vessels parents, but then your spirit is now reconnected with the divine parents that gave birth to the energy and your soul. So just like your dad taught you some things, your mom taught you some things, or depending on your life situation, if you grew up with a mom with no dad, there's got to be some male figure in there that influenced you in some way. There's always the influence of the masculine and influence of the feminine. And then we integrate that. And then sometimes one is more off balance than the other. And your job, is to balance the two of those. And because of the way that society is with the patriarchal jazz, we need to lean on the goddess quite a bit to bring her back into our awareness and bring her back into our spiritual practices and into our psyches so we can actually be fully balanced people. Because, if you got up and went to work today, that's masculine-based stuff. Driven, task-driven, do stuff, get stuff done. If you are in a creative field and whatnot, you might be a little bit more connected with the divine feminine, because the divine feminine is that creativity, it's that mystery. It's not the steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's the going with the flow. So I might be stepping into another video's content at this point, but as you can see, the divine feminine was worshipped by both men and women since the dawn of recorded history, and we need to remember that. So if you are a guy that's wondering about how to elevate yourself and become more whole, more complete, then this is your invitation to work with the goddess. I'm actually going to I started writing the curriculum and stuff for an Udemy course on working with the goddess. And once that's done, you'll find that in the link tree down below, along with all my other classes. And we're probably going to get around to finishing that book at some point. That's kind of been on the back burner because we've really been diving into this work, my lady and I. And I'm hoping to get her back on here to talk about the divine feminine too. So look forward to that. Ask any questions you got down below. Email me, check out my classes, my other videos, my Magic for Hire, any of that good stuff through the link tree. Subscribe if you haven't. Drop a like if you like this one, and I'll see you next time. Good hunting.